Well, no easy way to say it. Another tough afternoon for the 2022 Las Vegas Raiders. Eddie Pascal hanging out with Jesse Merrick. I'm so flustered, Jesse, that I can't even get my name right. But I think what we're going to try to do to Jesse today, as the Raiders lose 27-20 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, falling to 2-6 on the season in the process. I think we're going to try to make some sense of what happened, of what's going on. I think stating the obvious, no easy answers at this point. You and I are not going to solve the puzzle of the 2022 Raiders on our post-game pod today. But, I mean, where to begin? I think that the obvious place to start is the Raiders blowing their third 17-point lead of the year. But, I mean, when you looked at it, I know that you and I haven't had a chance to go back and watch it again, but just first reactions from what we saw this afternoon.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Again, you mentioned the third blown 17-point lead. For me, I look back at the previous two. You look at the Cardinals, and you also look at the Chiefs in that one. Two offenses that at times can be very high powered. Specifically more so with the Chiefs. I know the Cardinals have had their issues. And the Jags have some guys, but, not the same type of talent that those teams do. So, I didn't really feel when they were up 17-0, I was like, okay, they're in a good spot here. But, with those other games, I felt kind of uneasy knowing, that this could still happen. So I was a bit blindsided by seeing it happen that way. And for me, you just look at it and you see Davante going for, 10 for 146 yards and 2 TDs in the first half. Or 9 for what it was, I believe, right? Because he had one catch in the second half. And then, the adjustments that the Jags made, in terms of adding more doubles in there, not as much single coverage, which obviously is a smart move to make after what he did to you in the first half. And they go to him 7 times, I believe, in the second half there, and, comes down with one catch. And, you would still like to see him feed him more, the success that they had. But it just seemed like overall they were unable to adjust to the adjustments that the Jags made. And, the opportunities that they did have just didn't convert on, which I know is an answer that fans don't want to hear, but, that's kind of the truth.
Yeah, I think the hard part for me, Jesse, when you look at Davante's line from the first half, and you were dead on where he goes 9 catches on 9 targets, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, finishes the day with 10 catches. I think what's hard is that we've heard so much about, especially for the first part of the year, about the adjustments, right? And you said it perfectly. The Raiders today were unable to adjust to the adjustments. And granted that we haven't had a chance to go back and watch it and see really what the Jags did to take him away. I mean, what did the Jags do to take him away? Because, some of those balls that he was catching in the first half, you and I could have gone out there and made those catches. He was wide open. I know in the one touchdown the DB fell down. But, to go from feast to famine, literally in the span of an hour and a half of real time, to me, is boggling.
It is crazy. And the thing, too, at the end of the day is, it's Davante Adams. You're going to be double covered.
Yeah.
And he knows that, and this is nothing that he and Derek Carr wouldn't also repeat, is the fact that, when he's double covered, he still has to come down with a lot of these things. And there's some balls, specifically, what was it, the 2nd and 10, I believe, on the last possession?
Yep, there was the last one. You feel like 9 times out of 10 he comes down. Now, and exactly. I think to be very clear, though, that's a tough catch.
Oh, 100%.
That is a really tough catch. Going up, making that athletic play in the middle, having at least getting a chance to get a hand on it, is impressive in and of itself. But to your point, when you are Davante Adams, there's the assumption, there's the expectation that you do come down with those.
Exactly. And even though, to that note, teams are going to do that, they're going to double cover him, that means other guys do need to step up, and the opportunities are there for them. And you go and you look at it, Foster Moreau, 2 catches. That's the next closest person after Davante's 10. You've got Hunter Renfrow with 3, Josh Jacobs with 3, Mac Hollins with 3. It should be, or Mac Hollins with 1. Sorry, with 2. That is. Can't read, but the other guys should have and need to step up. The efficiency wasn't there after the fact as well, and obviously, Carr still wants to go to Davante even when they're doubling them, or even when there's 3 guys in that area, which isn't a bad throwing to a guy like Davante, but it makes those throws so much tougher because the window is so much smaller, obviously. And I think overall, stepping away from the Davante part of it, you look at the first half, the Jags were kind of shooting themselves in the foot, for a handful of those times. Was, I think, the 3rd and 1 on the toss to ETN. They don't block Max, comes through with the tackle for a loss.
Bizarre play call, too.
Yeah.
Just, standing back now, definitely a funky kind of call there on 3rd and short.
Very odd. The way that he's been able to attack the line of scrimmage, you think they go straight there. And then also, they fumble the toss as well later on there. The DB falls, we noted, multiple things where it's like, again, not to take anything away from what the Raiders, defense and offense did in the first half, but things that just went their way, breaks that went their way, that didn't, and then you pair that with the fact that they weren't able to adjust and adapt to what the Jags were doing, and it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, It's tough. It's a tough one to kind of digest, a tough one to really understand what exactly went wrong, because I think that you look, and when we go to halftime, the Raiders are up, 20-10, and you look at that final possession where they essentially traded field goals, and you're like, that was the moment, right? That's where the moment where you feel like the Raiders can say, hey, and give them credit. The first 30 minutes, they were playing really good football. And they got a little help from the Jags along the way, but they were playing good football. That was the moment at the end of the first quarter, the end of the first half, you say, hey, really kind of, apply yourself, put your foot on the throat, whatever, corny sports cliche you want.
Yeah.
And that moment, I don't want to say slipped away from them because they did put points on the board, but it could have been a bigger moment, and I think it should have been a bigger moment for them.
No, it definitely should have been 100%. You see that also, too, as you end the half with that last drive where they, I believe, let me pull up the drive chart here. Last drive of the win where they go 5 plays, 22 yards, and punt. No, that was the end of the second quarter. And the Jags are able to kind of get back and kick that field goal, like you said, to go in the half only down 10. That's where it's like, look, you have to convert and not allow them that time to do it, to kind of get that 2-for-1. Obviously, you start the half off with that kickoff return.
In hindsight now,
big,
look at, that's a huge moment.
Oh, yeah.
In hindsight, yeah.
Massive. I mean, puts them in better field position. All of a sudden, the defense is like, oh, man, we're backed up, bad spot here. And then you let the Jags get going. And they were also throwing very high efficiency passes. It was 3 steps, bam, 3 steps, bam. They were talking about it on the broadcast as well. It looked like one of those ones where you put it on a poster and, use that as your marketing tool, with Trevor Lawrence back there, because it was just so crisp and clean. And he's getting it out and gets to a rhythm, much like we saw Derek Carr early on from that second drive on when they were getting going. And that opens up so many other things for them. And then you see the Raiders come out in the second half. We talk about the adjustments. Well, the Jags were in more of that too high shell, like we saw against other teams previously, in the years where Josh Jacobs was, going after it. And you run to try and get them out of that too high shell to be able to throw the ball more to Devontae and the other receivers. And they weren't really able to get that run game going either.
And you talk about that efficiency. I mean, we're looking at Trevor Lawrence's line for today. He goes 25 of 31, 235 yards. Perhaps the most glaring thing, if you're a fan of the silver and black, on his stat line, no sacks.
Yeah.
And to me, I think, and I know we're going to sound like a broken record, but the defensive line pressure just simply hasn't been there this year. I mean, give Max Crosby a ton of credit. Max once again played his rear end off. Had a lot of really good moments. I mean, the one that Etienne ended up scoring, that they ended up reviewing. I mean, Max gets the ball out. That's just a play of not giving up, right?
Yeah.
And I know it literally doesn't show up on the stat sheet because it counts as a touchdown. But I think that's Max in a nutshell, just going. He has the fumble recovery. He's active. But outside of Max, I mean, there was nothing there.
Yeah.
There was nothing there today. And I think if you're Trevor Lawrence, and to your point, incredibly efficient, I mean, it didn't really feel like he was hanging out in the pocket all that much.
No.
It was 1, 2, 3, bang, there goes the ball. Bang, there goes the ball. And the Raiders DBs just didn't have an answer for what he was doing out there.
And look at the guys that he's throwing to.
Yeah.
Also,
Christian with all due respect,
yeah. Exactly. All due respect, 100%. Like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, those aren't world beaters. The tight ends that he has, I'm sure most fans of football couldn't name, many of the receivers outside of those top 2 guys there on this team. And then also when you throw in the tight ends that he was getting it to. So it's not like he has this unbelievable supporting cast that's out there doing it. So, again, you noted the efficiency with Lawrence. Got to tip the cap to him because he also
100%.
did it with his legs as well.
Doug Peterson, too. I mean, the way that he schemed out Trevor Lawrence for the day, understanding maybe, I don't want to say the inefficiencies of his offense, about the realistic setup of his offense. I mean, tip your cap to them because Doug Peterson went out there and did that thing.
No, he definitely did. A great game plan for them and great adjustments coming out in the second half there. And you noted, it's Max and kind of nobody else. Mm-hmm. You just can't have that. And then it just allows this team to go and be balanced and hit you with the run, hit you with the pass. And everything, their entire playbook is open to them. Whereas we saw with the Raiders today, trying to establish the run, unable to do that. So you're kind of short-sighted in what you need to do here. And so Derek Carr ends up having a very inefficient day because, you're sitting there back there passing all the time. And those D linemen on the opposite side can pin their ears back, forcing you off your spot and everything like that. And it's tough to do. It's tough to live that way in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think, another kind of aspect to this whole thing, and we were talking about it in the studio this week, was obviously you look at what Alvin Kamara did last week in New Orleans and slicing and dicing the Raiders defense. We're like, okay, let's see what the Raiders defense learned because Travis Etienne is essentially Alvin Kamara 2.0, right? A little younger, a little greener, but a guy with a really similar skill set. I mean, and Etienne, while it felt like he was contained for bits and starts of this game, finishes his afternoon 28 rushes, 109 yards. Also chips in with 2 catches for 17 in the passing game as well. I mean, that's almost 130 yards from total scrimmage for Travis Etienne. So what, in hindsight, do you do to get a guy like him, the Alvin Kamara Swiss Army knife, athletic, agile, speedy dude. Like, what do you do to take him away?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, we saw Divine Diablo go down early.
And that certainly doesn't help.
Yeah.
Denzel Perryman comes out for a little bit. He gets
Exactly.
nicked up. Like, definitely playing with the full complement there.
Exactly. And so in situations like that, you're leaning on some of your more athletic linebackers. Divine is specifically more so that guy that, works in coverage. So losing him doesn't help. Having said that, it's the cliche next man up needs to respond. And they weren't able to do that. Also, too, you look at, when you roll safeties down in coverage and stuff like that, they haven't been very effective in coverage either. And so it's tough against guys like that can do so many things that are that Swiss Army knife, when you don't have people filling into those roles and doing their job, being able to do it. Also in the zone, we've seen multiple times throughout the season, teams are finding holes in this zone. So I think maybe tighten it up a lot. Multiple times I find myself watching this game thinking, man, like there's so much room for these receivers, these running backs, whoever it is in the passing game to work with. So you got to find a way to kind of tighten that up a bit, And I know it's not a specific answer, but it's one of those things where it's hard because the teams are doing it in so many different ways,
And we're at the point now, the Raiders are 2-6, and you say, hey, there's no easy answer. Like, there's really no easy answers to anything right now. I think it's fair to say that all of us are pretty bamboozled that this team is 2-6. I think that's fair and appropriate, and especially losing several games now, the way that they've lost them, it leaves you scratching your head, and you say, we've seen it. And Coach McDaniels brought it up in the post-game press conference. He goes, look, we've seen this team play really good halves. You and I have had this conversation since October, September, late September. Like, hey, they can put together a really good 30 minutes. Hey, they can put together a good 45 minutes. But for whatever reason, Jesse, 60 minutes of good complimentary football has evaded the Raiders in 2022.
Yeah, and to me, look, I know fans want heads to roll and all these things, and I understand it. You guys are fans for a reason. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it should happen anytime soon. But having said that, what you're asking in that one right there, to me, points to the coaching staff. Look, at the end of the day, it's your job to make those adjustments and figure it out in the second half, and that's where that kind of chess match comes in play there at the half. When what you do is working, you obviously know teams are going to come out and scheme it up differently. And so, when you're not able to get it to Devontae, you need to scheme up other ways in order to get it going there, specifically on the defensive side of the ball as well. Put your guys in better situations. When they're getting the ball out quick like that, tighten up your coverage. Maybe switch to more man coverage. Get up in there. You got guys like Rock Ya-Sin and Anthony Averett, who are good man coverage, physical type of corners. I just didn't see enough of that.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, the injury bug is starting to hang out a little bit for the Raiders, trying to say hello. And, no Darren Waller today. We talked about Divine Diablo going down. Denzel Perryman missed a little bit of time. One linebacker who I did think had a really nice game, Blake Martinez, comes in, does his thing, leads the team in tackles. But, shifting back to the offensive side of the football for a minute, Jesse, I think you go back to that first half, and it felt and it looked like everything to 17 was just working. Yeah. Now, the one statistical oddity of this whole first 30 minutes of football is that Josh Jacobs was a non-factor. Like, give the Jags the credit for completely taking him away. Yeah. I think he finished the first half with either 0 or a single rushing yard. So he was not there. But you go to the second half now, and you go and you understand, like, okay, we see what's working today, right? Like this first half seemed like a bit of a departure from the typical formula. Yeah. The typical formula for the Raiders when they've been successful in 2022, pound the rock, pound the rock, pound the rock. Let Josh cook and kind of work off that. Well, today was kind of the opposite, right? Where Devontae's in the zone, Derek's feeding him, and you kind of, like we said, Josh was a non-factor. But regardless, the team was putting points up. They were moving the football. They were efficient. You come back down to this fourth quarter now, and once the Raiders went down 24-20, they had 4 chances, 1, 2, 3, 4 series to put some points on the board and to take a lead or to put anything up there. And they weren't able to do it. And I think, to me, that is the most confusing, head-scratching moment in all of this, where give Derek a ton of credit. Throughout his career, when the lights are bright, when it's that fourth quarter, we've all seen the DC comeback stats. Yeah. They're incredible. But today, just something was amiss, especially over that final 15 minutes or so. Or really, let me do my math terribly. Call it 14, whatever.
Yeah, math is hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
Look,
14:52, there we go.
There you go, yeah. To that point, it is crazy. You look at this, I look back to when they were up 17-0. I think they had 1 third down conversion after that throughout the entire game. they were getting first downs at times, converting on first or second down, getting a first down there. But, third down, just very inefficient. To me, the thing that stood out so much in that area was anytime they were in an obvious passing situation, the offensive line could not slow down the blitz that the Jags sent their way, forced Derek Carr off his spot. He's having to throw off the back foot, move around, all that stuff. Also, to that point, though, you saw Trevor Lawrence at times. We didn't see a ton of pressure from the Raiders defense, but when he was pressured, he was able to stay in the pocket, slip that tackle, and make a throw. So some of that's on Derek Carr as well, but the offensive line needs to figure out a way, and this is something I've seen throughout the season. Offensive line needs to figure out a way to stop the blitz in those obvious passing situations when they're coming at you. But it is just wild when you look at the inefficiency of this offense, down that stretch when you're down. And I know so many people want to talk about the defense. And, they came through with forcing the missed field goal when there was, what was that? So the Raiders take over after 3 minutes to go in the game or something like that.
Yeah, missed field goal comes at 3:03.
Yeah, so look, I mean, the defense hasn't been there. The defense allowed them to come back into the game, and take that 24-20 lead. But they make the stop when it matters and give you that opportunity. That's where this offense that was so successful in the first half needs to get something going. And you talked about how the recipe was a bit different. Normally it's Josh Jacobs. With this one, I think what they were trying to do there was open things up and get them into that too-high shell so that they could run the ball. And that, to me, kind of stuck out when you come out. I think it was 3 straight run plays, I think, to start the second half. Or at least we saw 3 different running backs in there fairly early. So they were trying to establish that run and then maybe jump them out of that too-high shell again and keep them guessing. But it didn't work out. And right from the jump there, after they scored that touchdown, the inefficiency in the second half just did not stop and didn't slow down.
And I think you bring up a great point where we've all talked a lot about the Raiders defense in 2022, specifically where they've struggled, their shortcomings. I don't think anyone here has anticipated them to be the 85 Bears at all, but I think it's fair to say that there's been moments where they haven't put it together as much as we'd like, right? But you said it perfectly. When they needed a stop with 3:08 left in the fourth quarter to give your offense a chance to go win the game, that's what they did. And it wasn't the sexiest stop of all the defensive stops we've seen. It was a field goal miss, but it was a stop nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so it's just a baffling kind of turn of events. And you were talking about third down inefficiency. The Raiders, and this is wild, Raiders were 3 of 12 on third down today.
Crazy.
Conversely, the Jags are 9 for 15. And this is a trip too, not even really thinking about it, as we're watching the game, but the Raiders go 0 for 1 in the red zone today. That's, wild stuff. And it's just, you have to give the Jags credit for doing enough to win the ballgame. You absolutely do. We talked about Trevor Lawrence, and we talked about how efficient he was. It wasn't the sexiest game that we've ever seen on offense for any football team, but they did enough to win the game. But it really feels like this is one of those missed opportunities for the Raiders. Anytime you're up 17, I don't care if you're playing Pee-wee, high school, whatever it is, if you're up 17 and the offense is clicking, you have to feel like, hey, we're in a pretty good spot going into the second half of this thing.
Yeah, that should never be any question, whatsoever. We talked about it so much last year, about the offense being a top 10 offense, and if the defense was just middle of the road, serviceable, that would be a game changer for them. And this, we thought, would be a playoff team, and lo and behold, they went and did that. Now, as we noted, it's not all on the defense, but if the defense can figure out a way to do that, just be that middle of the road group, or again, I point to multiple times in the throughout these last handful of games, we've seen them come through with one big stop late when they needed to and give them the opportunity, and that's again where the offense isn't able to get it done. But it's just like you said, I understand why it's frustrating for fans because it just seems like it's a different thing every week. Same storyline, same answers after the fact from a lot of the coaches and players, but also it's like, what are you going to say? You just keep going back to what you believe in and what you're putting in the systems and whatnot. The thing that did stick out to me though is, it seemed like early on they were responding and correcting a lot of the mistakes from that game against the Saints. You come out and see the success that they had. And it felt like this was going to be more of a player-driven game plan rather than a Josh McDaniels scheme-driven game plan, if that makes sense. More of just, we're going to feed Devontae because he's the best receiver in the league. We're going to get this guy going. And then I saw it shift back to what we'd seen in previous weeks where it's maybe almost kind of like well, no, this is the scheme we're running. It doesn't matter who the player is. We're calling plays rather than drawing it up to get to specific guys.
And that's such a unique balance,
yeah,
right, of understanding that Davante is one of the best. And I thought this was kind of funny. I don't know if you caught the pregame, but Nate Burleson was putting together his 5 wide receivers, right? And he's going through it. And obviously I don't put a ton of stock into that. But I was like, oh, Davante's not on this list. Then they went back to the studio at halftime, and Nate Burleson's like, listen, I apologize. Davante Adams should have been on my top 5. But, all the same, it's that delicate balance of understanding that Davante is an elite playmaker in the NFL, wanting him to get his touches, wanting to give him a chance to go make plays, while also understanding that he's got to work, or I didn't say he, but his role has to kind of fit within the overarching offensive scheme. So that is not an easy place, I think, for any coach to exist, understanding like, I got one of the elite dogs in the NFL, but we also have to figure out a way to keep the defense honest. And it, unfortunately, it just didn't come to fruition for the Raiders today. But, we're talking about, some of those kind of tough questions and those tough answers. And Tyler Harris tweeted at you and I, and he goes, look, man, as a fan, I don't want to act like I have all the answers. That said, what is a realistic time frame to make changes? And I don't think he's going on to read the rest of his tweet. He goes, defense is bad. We have some bad, questionable play calls, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think he's looking for wholesale personnel coaching staff type changes.
Yeah.
I think he's asking realistically, this team's 2-6. What can we expect going forward? How can this team get better as now they come home to get ready for the Indianapolis Colts a week from today?
Yeah, I mean, it might just be as easy as like simplifying things, figuring out, all right, this is our bread and butter. This is what we can do, both offensively and defensively, and sticking to that. I mean, we saw last year with Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator, he ran the similar stuff, most of the time. And, it worked more often than not. Obviously, the defense wasn't amazing, but they came through at times. It was more of that bend, don't break. And we've seen this team, I believe, I can't remember the exact stat, but I heard it on the broadcast. They were talking about in goal-to-go situations, I think they'd allowed 14 touchdowns or something like that. And that's just unacceptable. It was 14 for 14 in those situations. You can't do that. And so you just got to figure out a way to slow these offenses down and simplify things. And it doesn't always look like guys are lost, but just maybe go back to more of your basics. Hey, look, we're going to run man coverage on this one. We're going to get them and press them in their face and collision these receivers and try and knock off the timing. Because to me, this zone doesn't seem like it's working. I see a lot of the zone. And I know Patrick Graham, he's a really intelligent dude. His scheme is so great. But it's like maybe the guys aren't ready for all those different looks and things like that as they're trying to do this, which sucks because you're, 8 games in, now? You would think guys would have more of a handle on it. And not to say they do, because, again, like he said, we all don't have the answers.
Yeah.
And I think kind of the outside looking in.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway from right now is that there are no simple answers.
No.
Right? Like, it's not as simple as like, oh, we just need to get the run game going.
Yeah.
Oh, Davante needs his touches. Oh, the defense needs to get better. Like, it's more complex. It's more kind of nuanced than that because you don't get to 2-6 with only one thing kind of going not going your way and kind of falling in a way that isn't positive for you. And I'm just like, I'm like you. I'm a big fan of keeping it simple, right? You don't need to rewrite the book. You don't need to do this. You don't do that. For me, when the Raiders have found success in 2022, granted it's only been a pair of wins, what has the formula been? We were talking about it. Run Josh.
Yeah.
Let Derek work off of that. Have the defense make big plays when they have a chance to, keeping in mind that they're likely not going to pitch a shutout, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Win time of possession. Do your thing there. Give your guy, give Josh and Derek as many runs, no pun intended, at getting into the end zone, and typically good things have happened. So for me, I'm curious if we see a return to that because we talked about today being kind of the departure from the norm, and for the first 30 minutes, it was a great departure, fantastic departure, couldn't have been any better. But I wonder now if Josh McDaniels and the staff looks back and they say, okay, what is the common thread for when we've done well? Let's just do that. Let's commit to that. Let's be that for the second part of 2022.
Yeah, when I think, as you were talking about that, just, specifically on the offensive side of it, I look back to, what's worked well for the Patriots over the years, And look, Tom Brady, obviously, one of the greatest to ever do it. But even with Mac Jones, what he's able to do, in that offense. It's predicated on establishing the run and then throwing those quick, short passes. And we've seen it at times with Davante. A lot of those where they get it to him and let him go make plays in space. I think you probably do more of that again to get Carr in a rhythm. And to your point, too, as well, of what that formula for success has been is get Josh going, and then it opens the rest of the stuff up. How many times have we seen Josh Jacobs rips off a 8 to 12-yard run, next play, boom, Davante Adams for a first down? That's got to be your recipe for success. And then fill in the other guys, the other playmakers you have where you can. I mean, before the season started, we looked at this thing on paper, and obviously Darren Waller's health aside, we looked at it. We said Davante Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow. We haven't seen enough, I think, of putting defenses in positions where they have to account for all three of those guys. Or even Foster Moreau, who I think is a much better tight end than a lot of people give him credit for.
Agreed.
Derek Carr obviously looked for him a handful of times. He gets 5 targets today. Not able to come down through with all of those in all those situations. But, you got to use these guys and work them off of each other and put these defenses in a bind. And you do that by setting up the run game and hitting those short passes and letting your guys work. Hunter and Davante, 2 of the shiftiest guys out there. Let them move and get things going.
Yeah, we're at the point now, 2-6, because of the 17 games. Now we're not officially at the halfway point, but it seems like a good point to kind of take stock of what's gone well over the first half and look forward now to the second half plus 1 game, whatever. Yep. Thank you, Goodell, for the weird 17. But, I think it's gut check time for the Raiders, right? Definitely. Like, I don't even, all the fans are going to be like, oh, the playoffs are out, this and that. Like, don't even worry about that. Yeah. Like, we're not even going to discuss the playoffs. We're not even going to discuss what has to happen in the division, the 74 bizarro scenarios that have to happen for X, Y, and Z. No, put that away. Focus on Sunday and get 1. And I think when this team, I think coming back to Allegiant is the best thing that could happen for this team right now. Having a chance to play in front of the home crowd, having a chance to feed off that energy from Raider Nation. I know they were down there in Jacksonville, but it's a completely different ball game playing here at that beautiful Palace off the Strip. So I'm excited for them to kind of put their best foot forward, look themselves in the mirror, make some adjustments, and say, hey, go out and handle business 1 week at a time and let everything else kind of fall where it falls.
Yeah, I think you look to that Colts game, and it's pretty simple in the sense of what's coming your way. The health of Jonathan Taylor up in the air. We'll see what happens. Obviously, he didn't play this week. But they want to run the football. They got a new quarterback in there, and Sam Ehlinger, still trying to prove himself, obviously. And they've got some big-time receivers in that offense, that can make some plays. But this is a team that wants to pound the rock. So as a defense, buckle your chin strap and get ready for this thing. For the corners, you got to watch out for Michael Pittman, man. Big-bodied dude. And then, defensively, what guys on this team don't know the scheme better.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys, Derek Carr specifically, went against it a lot of times in practice, in training camp and whatnot. And obviously, he's not going up against Gus Bradley's defense in practice, throughout the year because he's going against the opposing team, the scout team and whatnot as they're looking to, kind of game plan and whatnot. But there should be some familiarity there. There's going to be some on the other side with Gus Bradley too, but you know what you're doing and going up against, and it's not some crazy complicated defense with all these different movements and things going around, and a guy that doesn't blitz a ton. So this is one where I think the O-line should be kind of licking their chops saying, we're going to run the ball right back at you, kind of that like slobber knocker they call it, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be that old school, nasty, like, hey, who's the bigger, stronger guy in the trenches, and let's go run the ball. And look, I completely understand the fan sentiment. I mean, you and I see it on Twitter all the time. I think especially this afternoon, there's understandably a lot of frustration, a lot of upset, a lot of disappointment, and I get that. I really do. I mean, like we talked about at the top, like I don't think anyone in this room, I don't think anyone in this fan base thought that the Raiders were going to be at 2-6. I'll be honest, I didn't see him at 2-6.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think anyone did. So, but I think at this point now, you just kind of have to accept where you are realistically. You have to understand that, hey, we got to start stacking W's, but it starts with 1. It starts with 1 on Sunday. You got to figure out a way to kind of put this really suboptimal trip to the East Coast behind you, and you just say, hey, it happened. We got to learn from it. We got to be better from it. We got to adjust from it, and we just got to be better coming home. And really, the Raiders, we talked about it last week. Their runway for any type of error was like this big.
Yeah.
Now it's like this big. It's shrinking rapidly, and I think that there's an understanding in that locker room that the runway is shrinking, but it's not completely shrunk yet. So there still is a chance. And like I said, just got to start on Sunday stacking those wins.
And this is this is that gut check time. We saw it last year when they needed the 6 wins in order to get into the playoffs. Like you said, don't even worry about looking that far down the road or anything like that. You do have to take it by the cliche week by week and whatnot. But we saw afterwards, I know the stream cut out on Derek Carr's press conference, but he was like, there's a lot that I want to say that I won't. But these are going to be conversations that are going to be had man-to-man with some of the guys on the teams. And he was referencing, in terms of giving up these leads and things like that. And you've heard it multiple times throughout the year, whether it was Derek or Davante talking about, the full 60-minute game and, the attention to detail throughout the week and the game, all that different stuff. So I think this is this time, you look at the record, you look at what's happened. This is where the leaders on this team really need to get together and have kind of that come-to-Jesus moment with their team and say, look, this is what needs to be done. This is what it takes. And you lean on the guys that have been there, done that. We know Derek Carr's stats in crunch time, in terms of comebacks and whatnot. Devontae Adams, obviously, everybody's going to be looking to him because we know what he's done. Max Crosby, you lean on your leaders in this moment to set the standard for what this team and what it's going to look like moving forward, because there is still a lot of football to be played.
And it has to start now, right?
Yeah.
It has to start, starting tomorrow or Tuesday when the guys get back into the facility here. But thankfully, long flight home from Florida. So
Yeah.
a lot of time to think, a lot of time to go over things, a lot of time to have those conversations that you talked about. But Jesse Merrick, on our way out of here, we appreciate you coming to hang out with us today. You know the drill, 30 seconds of plugs. Where can the people find you?
Oh, yeah. Well, tonight, every Sunday is a busy one for us. So we've got sports night coming up. I'm riding solo there. Brian had to take off for a couple days. So I'm, recapping this one. Obviously, it's not a fun one to recap.
Yeah.
But tonight at 11:30, I'll be diving into all that. But as always, guys, on Twitter, at Jesse News 3LV, covering anything and everything Las Vegas sports, specifically with you guys, the Raiders.
There we go. Love to hear it. And hopefully next time we chat, we're talking about happier things. We're talking about Raiders wins. But alas, not the case today as the Raiders fall to 2-6, taking an L down in Jacksonville 27-20. So for Eddie Pascal, my man Jesse Merrick, who's good enough to hang out with us, Al on the ones and twos, and everyone else who helps get our little program from A to Z, thank you. And we will see you guys next week following the Raiders clash with the Indianapolis Colts on the fifth quarter, presented by Twitch.